I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is Our Nerdiest Thing.
This season, we are discussing Jennifer L. Armentrout's From Blood and Ash, all of the books in that series, plus the Flesh and Fire series as well. We are spoiler friendly, so listen at your own risk. Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. Today we are discussing From Blood and Ash chapters 33 and 34, the sexy time chapters.
Tell everyone what you were singing before we turned on the mics.
Sex. Sex. But before we get into it, Deb, will you please share our nerdiest cocktail?
So Jennifer, the cocktail evangelist from Make and Muddle, also loves these books. She always jokes that the cocktails are her nerdiest thing to talk about. And so this cocktail is called Say Goodbye to Cherry. It's good.
That's good.
Bourbon, spiced cherry vanilla syrup, fresh lemon juice, and aromatic bitters inside it. So you put it into a little chilled coupe glass, and then you garnish it with a cherry, which I think is hilarious.
Should you smash the cherry before you?
Ew.
That's taking it too far.
Whitney, you know how I feel about virgins in books.
They should all die.
Well, only if they have sex. Those are the rules. If you've not seen
a scary movie.
Yeah, if you've not seen Scream, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, speaking of. Oh, man. Mindy, have you spun the wheel of names?
I have.
Is it me?
Mindy, have you popped your cherry? That's where I thought you were going. You said it so sensually. Mindy, is your cherry smashed?
Oh, it is
you.
Yay.
Sex.
That's it. That's my 30-second recap.
I told Whitney it has to be more than 5 words.
And here we go. So, Poppy has asked Hawk to stay, and he's like, yeah, take this dick. And so she does, and it is great. And he leaves. Somebody comes and gets him in the middle of the night, and she's like, you know what? I'm not going to be the maiden anymore. Maybe Hawk won't want to be with me, but that's fine. I just can't do this. And then Phillips comes and is like, girl, we got to go. And she runs. Kieran turns into a wolf, and Hawk is revealed to have betrayed her.
Son of a bitch.
Son of a bitch.
Good job, Whitney.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You even screamed
so
sex
much.
a million times.
Well, I didn't say dick.
I believe the correct pronunciation of it was dick.
Dick. I was thinking about
How do you
that.
spell that?
I don't even know.
D-Y dick. D-Y-I.
D-Y-E-C-K.
I was thinking about that clip from was it Wanderlust when Paul Rudd gives that speech to himself in the mirror. He's like, "You gonna take that?" Dick." That's what I was thinking of.
I did a reel on our
Yes,
Instagram.
yes,
right.
that sounds.
Men trying to write romance. You're going to take that dick. My dick.
Exactly. Right.
I'm going to fuck you. Oh, I'm going to fuck you.
It's basically word for word what Hawk says.
That will never not be funny.
Yeah. Mindy, now that I've set the tone for the episode, will you share our nerdiest vocabulary?
Please tell me you looked up dick in Urban Dictionary.
I'm going to have to one of these days, aren't I? I feel like no matter what I look up, one entry has something about a dick.
Yeah. Either somebody has like a horrible, doesn't know how to use it dick, or like big, fat. Like last
Juicy,
episode, that's what it
velvet
was.
wrap steel.
I do have a very interesting bonus for this week.
Bonus dick?
Well, you shall see.
Ooh. That's what he said.
I did look up Phillips just for fun, and I didn't find a whole lot, but it does mean horse lover. So do with that what you will.
All right.
But our main attraction this week is Jericho. The dick.
Fucking hate him.
Boo.
So the word Jericho is from Arabic, and it means city of the moon, because it actually is a city in the Bible.
Yep.
That's interesting, though, since he's a wolf.
Exactly. I put moon, werewolf, wolven. Like that makes sense. But Jericho was...
Also, he's an ass. Get it,
With-
Moon?
Shaped like
I got it. So also Jericho was the city that Joshua destroyed by playing his trumpet to make the walls fall down. So do with that
Yeah.
what you will.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah,
when
we did
talked
talk about
the
that.
symbolism of walls.
Yeah. So, of course, you know where I went next.
Dicks?
The Urban Dictionary.
The Urban Dictionary.
DYECK.
So
I can't wait
there
to hear
was
these.
a plethora of fun things on the Urban Dictionary. So the first one is, this is a really depressed person and has no will to do anything. They are a useless sack of shit and are lazy. They cannot do anything, but they are a really nice person and will fight you if you mess with their friend. I mean,
that's somewhat
the nice
applicable.
person is debatable.
Not accurate. Yeah.
So there, there's some reality and truth to that. The second one is a small, shy, lonely boy that sits in corners at any parties and has no friends and cries a lot.
You know what? I bet Jericho
bet
is
he
a-
does.
Yeah, I bet he
He's
is
all
a sad,
pissed off
lonely
about
boy.
not having a hand.
he's all emo and shit.
He is.
And this one, I mean, I actually maybe learned something here. This is very intriguing to me. So this person swears that it's a gangsta street code representing what a thug sees and has to go through every day. And it stands for J, jealousy, E, envy, R, reality, I, ignorance, C, crime, H, hate, and O, obscurity.
That's
And
interesting.
the rest of it says snakes, backstabbers, haters, enemies in general are associated with one of these things when they attack you. If you are true to the thug life, then you have seen a lot of these things and are used to it.
So would you be called a Jericho? Or you have Jericho?
Or maybe, yeah, it's like doing the Jericho. I don't know.
Wow, we sound so white.
I am so not gangsta.
Please never say do it in the Jericho.
As long as Mindy never says the thug life. Well, golly gee willikers, he was part of the thug life.
So,
He smoked the pot and had the sex.
The marijuana.
so yes, that was not really anything to do with the character of
It was
Jericho,
deeper than I.
But I thought it was
expected to
it was
be,
a
honestly.
learning. It was something I learned.
Yeah,
I mean, I would say he goes through all those things.
I would too. Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
It's not other people doing that to him. It's him.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Cass's group is essentially like a gang.
That is
yeah.
true.
Well,
Yeah.
in Jericho's group that goes down
Absolutely.
later and tries to attack Poppy.
Definitely
They're
the
like
crime,
bitches.
the crime and the hate go along with that.
Yeah.
So I promised you a bonus, right?
Yes.
So as you scroll through Urban Dictionary, you get all the ones that are just Jericho, and then it starts like throwing in, city of Jericho,
Or
and,
like phrases.
yeah, other things that have Jericho in them. And I came across the balls of Jericho, and I was very curious.
Do those go with the blue labia?
I'm just going to read it. The balls of Jericho is a sex act of biblical proportion.
Stop it.
No. A man, I don't even know if I can say this. A man squats over a woman facing her feet and inserts his penis in her mouth. He simultaneously places his scrotum over her nose, preventing her from breathing.
Okay.
Nobody ever do a balls of Jericho.
I
Okay,
just ask
can
a
I go ahead
question?
and say that I'm just assuming that at any point my nose being flat up against your scrotum is not going to smell good. Okay, I know that men like it when women sit on their face. I do not want a man to sit on my face.
I don't want you to keep me from breathing with your balls. No, thank you.
Right? You like she has to breathe to suck, bro.
Yes, no kidding.
I'm going to just sit this one out.
Whitney's like, well, actually, the way it works at my house, he covers my eyes too.
Nope.
The balls of Jericho.
The balls of Jericho.
That sounds horrible. That's
interesting.
all
You don't
I've
want
gotta
that-
say about that.
You don't want that t-shirt?
I survived the balls of Jericho.
When we drop a merch for the podcast, that'll be the first thing. And the first thing to sell out as well, I'm sure.
Just has a nose on it.
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh.
It's already hard enough to breathe when one of those is in
Again,
your mouth. Don't cover up my nose.
I said this last week, and I'm going to say it again because it's still true. We just keep going off the rails earlier and earlier in these episodes.
It's not off the rails if it's normal for us.
That's
and this
true.
has become a normalcy.
Yeah.
It has become normal.
I'm not even sorry.
Real normal is boring.
Balls of Jericho is not boring or normal.
Or normal, yeah.
I mean, honestly, we will not judge you if you've ever done this and it's like enjoyable for some reason. I would really like you to DM us, and I want to
Yes,
find
please
out.
explain.
Please explain.
Explain yourself.
Also, I don't. If the guy's squatting over your face, facing your feet, that means you can see his asshole.
Yeah, that just does not sound.
Yeah,
I was gonna say appetizing.
Some people do think that's
You
appetizing.
know what? Let's get into
But
the
I
book.
was gonna. I was
Let's
gonna
stop this here.
I was gonna call it a brown hole, which makes it definitely not appetizing.
Oh my gosh.
I don't want to see that. I don't want your balls on my nose, and I don't want your ass crack at eye level.
No
I hope
thanks.
our editor, producer of the podcast is taking notes.
He knows. The one time we tried this, it did not work. No,
You tried the balls of Jericho?
no, just the balls of Brian.
Oh man. So in chapter 33,
what I really, really want. Not balls of Jericho.
not the balls of Jericho. So in chapter 33, or at the end of chapter 32 rather, Poppy has asked Hawk to stay the night with her. And I did really enjoy how vulnerable and honest he is with her. Like he always is with her, but especially in this moment where he says like, if I stay, you will not walk out that door, the maiden, anymore. And I wrote,
she's like,
yes.
She's like, I know.
I know that. Yeah. And he says, I'm so incredibly unworthy of you. It should be a sin. And I'm like, well, in this moment,
It kinda
yeah,
is.
it kind of is. And she says, this actually kind of broke my heart a little bit. She says, this I wanted. Hawk was who I wanted. This was my choice. Because that's her big thing, right? Yeah. But it is not an informed choice. Because he's keeping, he isn't who she thinks he is, right? And he's got this ulterior motive and this big plan to use her that she doesn't know about. And so she is making a choice for herself that ultimately does work out for the best. But in this moment, when she makes that choice, it's not an informed choice.
She doesn't have
And
all
that-
the information.
Yeah, that bugs me a lot.
I think also what makes this so sad is the reader, if you've read this before, is she says, this was my choice. And then she compares it to, she says, I was reclaiming my life. She compares it to learning how to fight, helping the cursed, and using her gift, even though it's forbidden. So she's taking all of these things that have been very positive, eye-opening moments for her and comparing it to essentially having sex with Hawk, which makes it worse because her eyes are not open.
Right, exactly. And I did really like this. She's trying to reclaim her life. She says that I'm reclaiming my life, which is great and a really important moment for her. And I did like this as a character choice and a writing choice by Jennifer Armentrout, where Poppy says Hawk wasn't the catalyst, he was the reward.
I loved
which
that
I
line,
really,
too.
really like, because this is not a situation where this is what I wrote down. Poppy is not changing for a man or because of a man. She's making yet another defiant choice to maintain control of her own life. She's not a damsel in distress. She is a queen.
Yeah.
And I love that because I feel like there's already so much complication with her relationship with Hawk in all of this
But it could have been
stuff.
so easy to write it as, and he was
100%.
amazing, and he really
Yes.
helped me get there, and
Yeah.
he made me so strong. And she's like,
Yeah.
no, I'm strong on my own.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
this is what I get for being
Yeah.
myself.
Yes.
I'm going to fuck this boy because I want to.
Well, and she goes through like all these little things that she has done, and these moments we have seen her be defiant and like make these choices for herself to kind of prove to the reader like this is not because of Hawk.
Yeah.
This is Poppy still being Poppy. He's just now in her world, right? Like he's not the one that made all this happen, which I really, really love.
One of my favorite lines when she's going through all those things too is when she says, when I sliced Lord Mazine's arm and hand and head from his body,
Yeah.
I'd been cutting through the chains I never chose to wear.
I know. Yes.
Like,
so incredibly violent.
no. But,
And
that's like, what a metaphor there. Like, she's cutting off from all this, like, oppression, basically, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about, though, like, he takes off his pants and she literally trembles at the sight of him. And it says he was beautiful. And I wrote, careful, that dick's going to be your undoing. So with that also, she said there's no mistaking how life had left its imprint behind in the faint nicks and longer scars on his flesh, which if you read further into the series, you know were cuts from the Ascended getting blood out of him. And so she's noticing things on his body that her mother did to him to help make other Ascended.
Yep. And she doesn't know what she's looking at.
Right. And she even brings up the brand that she somewhat recognizes but can't figure out how she knows it. And that's when he's like, it was many years ago when I was dumb enough to get caught. And I'm like, oh, poor Hawk. Poor Castile.
Well, and like he says it in such a flippant way for something that is so traumatizing.
It's defined his entire life.
Existence. Yeah. At one point she wonders how thick the walls are. Which really made me laugh.
His dick made her tremble by looking at it. She's like, oh, fuck, I'm going to be a screamer. I can already tell.
I know. That made me laugh.
Oh, but I love it too, though, when he says to her, when she's looking at him like that, you keep looking at me like that, and it's going to be over before this starts. I'm like,
Yep.
So he's just as turned on by her as she is by him.
100%. Yeah. And she still is like not really convinced that he actually feels that way, right? Like she's got so much self-consciousness. But the next thing that I wrote down speaks to that, where she says that he like worships her scars until she is positive that he sees them as nothing but beautiful, right? Like he's not grossed out or weirded out by them or whatever, horrified, like she assumes an Ascended would be, right? Like I'm going to marry somebody who's going to think that I'm like tainted or a tragedy because I've got these. And he makes her feel like beautiful and confident, which swoon worthy, even though I'm mad at him at this point. But I loved how because I don't think I've ever thought about it like this before. He does all the things with her, right? Like every kind of intimacy he is doing with her, which I've never really thought about. Like he just wants to be the first one to do all these things. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Because I've always thought of it like, are you going a little overboard, JLA?
I also thought it might be because he thinks it's the only time he'll get to do these things.
Yeah, but then he keeps talking like when we do, like the Blood Forest, when we talked about like when I do this again, you know, I won't have your clothes on and it'll be like this. Like he keeps talking like he's planning for a future. But yeah, maybe he does think this is the only chance that I'll have. I don't know.
This is the reckoning because shit's about to hit the fan.
And at one point he says like this changes everything. Mm-hmm. Like you have to be sure because this is going to change everything. And it's like, it did.
So I'll tell you two things really do it for me in this chapter. Number one is when, you know, he's done like worshiping her scars and he literally like just looks at her in the eye and goes to town.
Yeah.
And then it's the first time you ever hear him actually say to her, like, he confirms that she tastes like honeydew.
Oh, yeah.
And someone on TikTok a couple of years ago went through and did screenshots of all the time he says honeydew. And like, literally, it's enough times to make your panties fall.
Oh, that's so great. I do really like, he is very sweet and very sensitive, like to her experience because he knows that she doesn't have any experience. So I do really like that he is very aware that he wants this to be about her, right? Which you guys were talking about either this episode or last week, maybe like nobody's like that in real life, right? No. But I do really like that. He wants her to feel satisfied. He wants her to feel pleasure, and he wants her to feel confident, right? And she says, this felt too right for it not to be in some way destined. And I wrote down Goddess Penelope, right? We've talked about her seeing Poppy and Castile in her vision of the future, right? I also wrote down some foreshadowing here when they're having actual intercourse. She says some kind of primal instinct took hold. Did you guys catch that?
I didn't.
A primal instinct took hold, and I was like, ooh, here we are all the way back in book 1, right? With that foreshadowing there. I noted that he grazes her throat with his fangs.
I noticed that,
which in later books he talks about, like, I've been thinking about, you know, drinking from you while I'm inside you, you know, and now I finally get to do it. And, you know, thrill of his life, I guess. And so then we get to the part where I get really upset. So last episode I talked about how there was a part of this weeks reading where the first time I read it, I was like, oh, you're going to do something to make me mad. And it's right here at the end of their, post orgasmic bliss, right? Their afterglow. He says, promise me that you won't forget that this is real. No matter what happens tomorrow, whatever. And the first time I read this, I was like, you are going to do something stupid. I know it.
I wrote, oh, Hawk, honey, you're about to fuck it all up.
Right.
So legit, the first time I read this, because this book was really unexpected for Mindy and I, our friend Holly, shout out to Holly, told us to read it. Holly. She told us to read it. And of course, I didn't really know what I was getting into. Mindy read it. She said it was really amazing. And then I read it and of course got obsessed like I do. And the first time I read that paragraph, I bawled because I was like, it's over.
Yeah.
This part's over.
Yeah.
And like, you can just tell as the reader, you're like, I don't know what's about to happen.
It's a shift.
Something
It's like
bad.
definitely a tone
Right.
shift.
And I don't know how she takes you, the JLA, I don't know how she takes you from believing him so completely to changing it in just a couple of pages.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know how she did that, but I was just like, you son of a bitch. What
It's
is
almost like
happening?
as soon as they get to New Haven,
Yes.
it's like a light switch.
And
well,
it is,
because
right?
he
Yeah.
has to
'Cause
get
he
down
has
to business.
Yes.
Because now he's among the people.
All of his
Yeah.
people, he has to switch back into like Prince Castile, and he
Mode,
doesn't
yeah.
get to just be Hawk anymore.
Yeah.
Which some of the teasers kind of speak to that
Yeah.
for the Soul of Ash and Blood Hawk POV Castile POV book. But yeah, she has this really great experience.
Can
and
we
then
talk about that though? Because my virgin experience was not
yeah.
a good experience. Like I personally do not know one single woman that's like, yeah, my first time I had an orgasm. My first time, I remember being like, is that it?
is this what everybody made a big deal about? Like,
why
okay.
is this so good?
Well, so I did my deep dive about that because
About me not having an orgasm?
specifically you, Deborah. Yeah.
I can give you
No.
that guy's name if you want.
No, thank you.
You don't want it.
I've mentioned this in a previous podcast episode as one of my nerdiest things, but I wanted to actually look it up because what I had mentioned before was I was listening to a podcast where they mentioned this study. And so I did a deep dive on the study and I'm going to talk about it here. So it basically talks about women. The study focused on heterosexual women, just FYI. So these results are that specific grouping of people. I got this from neuroscience.com, which is basically a summary of a study published by Diana Peragine from the University of Toronto. I'm assuming that that's a French pronunciation, but I don't really know. So this is
I'd
called...
have to look at it to see. Yeah.
This is called First Sexual Experience Influences Women's Future Sexual Desire. So this study showed that women are only different from men in their desire for partnered sex if their first experience wasn't an enjoyable one. AKA if they did not have an orgasm. So this study looked at heterosexual women who are and their desire for intercourse with a partner, not like using a vibrator or masturbating or anything like that, but with your partner, right? And so the only time that women's sex drive was different from men's sex drive was when women did not orgasm the first time they had sex. So
I'm not calling either of you out, so I'm just going to leave this very broad. Do either of you know anyone that had an orgasm the first time they had sex? Oh wait,
Not
you can't
openly.
You okay? All right.
I don't know that I've had any conversations with anybody who was like, yeah, my first time was amazing. Who wasn't a dude.
Well, okay. I'm not saying my first time was amazing because it wasn't, but Deb and I actually talked a little bit about this.
This is what we were talking about at dinner.
I know
tonight.
this was lovely dinner conversation.
This is why we started the podcast, because we talk about it anyway.
I learned at an early age how to pleasure myself, and I mean by early I mean like 5th grade, like pre-middle school. And
Thanks, Judy Blume.
right.
Yeah, what was that book? Forever.
Yeah, forever. Yeah.
Mindy's Sexual Awakening.
So yeah, I'm getting real here, guys. So I knew what it was supposed to feel like, right? And I was 16 when I had my first actual like partnered intercourse, and it was in a car. It was awful, but I got off because I knew what I was supposed to do. So I like made myself get off.
Well,
So, but it was me. It wasn't him.
so they speak to that a little bit later in the explanation of the study,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting. And it opens up like a whole other side to this conversation. But so the first time according to the study, during their first sexual experience with partnered intercourse, women were half as likely as men to report feeling satisfied at the end of the experience.
And half of those women were lying.
They were 8 times less likely to orgasm than their male partner. Which
Can I point out
feels
though that
accurate.
part of the issue is that sex ends when the guy gets off in our society, right?
Mm-hmm,
So if sex if it was a common enough courtesy for a guy to know that just because you got off doesn't mean she's done, then this study could be very, very different.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. It did not, they didn't specifically say like whether they actually talked to any men who did not orgasm the first time that they had sex, but
Because there aren't any.
right. It says that it does not seem to affect men's current sexual desires, whether or not they felt, so maybe this means whether they felt satisfied, whether or not they actually had an orgasm. I'm not really sure, but a quote from this study that I thought was interesting: rather than speaking to fixed gender differences in sexual desire, our findings raise the possibility that a sexual debut lacking an orgasm may be a common part of women's sexual socialization, where sexual activity may be de-incentivized. So, in other words, instead of saying women just have lower sex drives, maybe like what you guys are saying, the overall experience of women in general is that they are not with partners that know what they're doing, or they don't know what needs to be done, whatever.
Or just because they're done doesn't mean the other
woman.
partner's
well,
done.
but that goes to the like they don't know what they need to do.
Right.
Do you know
exactly.
what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Because like if you get off, that's completely cool.
Great.
But like
Yeah.
I didn't.
bravo
So,
to you.
Right. So let's make sure it's bravo to me.
Yeah.
To
At least
everyone.
twice.
Yeah.
Well,
I love the word incentivized there.
Well, exactly.
Because why do we have to be incentivized? Like, why is that? But no. My point is like the guys are going to get theirs no matter what.
Yeah.
To
Right.
us,
Right.
we just have to hope and pray and cross our fingers that we're going to get what we need out of this.
Well, that's what they mean, right? Like the de-incentivized is like, well, it was actually frustrating for me because I didn't achieve an orgasm,
Well,
right?
It's like eating, if you ate a hamburger for the first time and then threw it up, you wouldn't want to eat it all the time.
Yeah.
It's the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other things that the study said is previous research, so like established research, shows men generally are more likely to suffer from problems of high sexual desire, and women are more likely to suffer from problems of low sexual desire. It did not go into detail, like specifically what all those things were, but it has become a very like, well, men have really high sex drives and women don't. And like this as a fixed gender difference, when really this study is suggesting, I guess I'll say not showing, but suggesting that maybe our sex drives would be equal depending on the type of
Right.
experience and level of satisfaction that you felt the first time, which goes back to we don't know what we're doing.
Right. So before
Generally, right?
Because I will say very confidently that the three of us are in highly satisfied sexual relationships.
Yeah, we
Yes.
are.
Yes.
Not with
and
each other. Let me clarify that.
Not yet. But like not to put us on the spot or anything, but like we are best friends and we do talk about these things. And like I do think a big key to the three of us are three people that have actually stayed married for a significant amount of time. And I think it's because we have good intimate relationships with our partners, or at least that's like a part of it, right?
Right.
Having said that, if any of us had partners beforehand, right, it wasn't like oh my gosh, I can't wait to have sex, because you never knew if it was going to be quote unquote worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and you know what? For
Frustrating
the guy,
or
right,
rewarding.
for
Yeah.
the guy too, like there's very little cleanup. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there's very little like social stigma to having a lot of sex as a man. So, you know, with previous partners, if I had sex with someone and then was deemed a slut and then had to clean your nasty ass cum off of me when I didn't get off, that is not very rewarding for me.
No.
And
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
you
Right.
go into it almost with the self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, I'm not even going to get off.
Right.
Well, and it all, I think, connects back to what, Mindy, you talked about several episodes ago about like that purity culture thing where it's women are given all the responsibility of like, help keep the guys pure, help keep them, not lusting after you. But at the same time, like in a certain way, purity culture holds women up on a pedestal in that way of like, it's all your responsibility. But then like there are no benefits in purity culture of like, well, they're up on this pedestal. So guys, when you're with a woman, when you're with your wife
worship
or
her.
whatever,
Yeah.
here's how you
Yeah.
worship her. Like there is none of that. It's just
Like-
all the responsibility with none of the reward.
Right. So like if you do want your partner to have sex with you though, make it worth it. It's
Right.
very simple. That's
Right.
just ask them what they want. Do what they want.
right.
Yeah.
Be impulsive. Do the things that you know that they need. And if you're quick to the gun, make sure they get it first.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do. It's not that
You
hard.
have to like practice some restraint.
Right. Yeah. Which I know for men is really hard. But like you could just not blow your load before I get off.
Oh my
That
gosh.
makes so much sense though, because behaviorally, and again, going back to incentive, behaviors, I mean, you can look at like children and reinforcement charts and whatnot. Like,
I was like, what?
you're like, wait, what? Sorry. I'm talking about behavior, not sex. So,
Were they on green all day?
exactly though, like they have tasks and they get rewarded for those tasks. Unfortunately, now we're a society where kids don't intrinsically want to do anything. They want to be rewarded for everything. Yeah. But behaviorally, if you're not getting rewarded for what you're doing, you're not going to want to do it. I mean,
Right.
it really makes so much sense.
Yeah. Well, and bringing it back to what you said at the very beginning of this conversation, Deb, like these fantasy books have these girls that have these amazing first sexual experiences, and then they continue to have these really high sex
that's a good
drives.
point.
They always want it, but
Yeah.
according to like this actual research, that's realistic.
Yeah.
I would be curious to find out how many women that write really good sex scenes had an orgasm the first time they had sex.
Well, that's what I wonder, like, and you know,
JLA, if you could call us and tell us if you had an orgasm the first time, that'd be great.
That's a
I
personal
have-
question.
I have DM'd some of the authors that we connect with on Instagram that write sex scenes, and I'm like, do you, just out of curiosity, like, are you writing from personal experience or like just your imagination? And
Is this why some authors stopped talking to us? I'm kidding. No,
Well, but,
no
like,
authors have stopped talking to us.
because
They're
that
all
is
great.
something that you have to think about if you're going to write a sex scene,
Yeah.
right? Like, because some authors make it kind of like a jokey thing, but they're for real doing like Barbie dolls. Like they do the positioning to
Right.
make sure that it's realistic, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? So is it experience? Is it imagination? Whatever. And a lot of times people are writing from imagination. And so it's like, are you writing just like wishful thinking, right? Like if I
Right.
had the perfect partner that knew exactly what I wanted, like this is how it would be, or because I hope you're just getting yours and
Yeah.
writing from that experience.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Because bravo to you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
But also, I mean, I think if you have a good, strong imagination, like most authors do, then
Right,
those are
exactly.
things you can come up with, right?
Right.
But also, you have to, JLA, for example, J.R. Ward is another one that's really, really good at this. You have to know what you like to be able to write it. So someone's done it right at some point for you.
Well,
Right.
yeah, that's true.
Right? Like you can't so JLA and J.R. Ward write really good oral sex scenes. And I mean, it's because they've had someone that knows how to do it right.
Right.
It's not like they
Yeah.
were like, yeah, if he put his head down here and did this and this and this, that would work. Like, you know what I
Sure.
mean?
Right.
So not
Yeah.
to like be gross or anything, but like, and I will tell you one thing. I think the reason that I find book talk so intriguing overall in this culture that we're living in inside of book talk and bookstagram is that it is almost a sexual awakening for women in terms there is no slut shaming. Like it is all about like it is okay to read these things, it is okay to be sexually attracted to your partner, it is okay to expect more out of sex than what you've been given, but you don't have to be dissatisfied. if you are with a partner that's not giving you what you need, go tell them what you want.
Yeah.
Like, and I love that they're in these books. That is what the women are doing.
Yeah.
And I think that is why ultimately now, not every Bookstagram account has to do with this, but I mean, a good majority of them do. I think it has to do with us coming together and being like, oh, you feel this way too? And like, I've always been crazy horny. It's nice to know that you do.
Right. Like, I'm not a sexual deviant because I like this, that, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It's okay for guys to be super horny all the time, but if you're a woman that's super horny, like, well, what's wrong with you? Don't you have anything else to do? And, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like,
Keep it in your pants.
right. Keep it in your pants, Whitney.
You know what's funny is when we started this episode, I was like, I actually don't have a ton of notes or a ton of things to say.
And then you were like, orgasm.
And then we went off the rails.
Then we talked about sex.
sex.
So anyway, yeah, so there you go. And also, I wanted to add this caveat to all this research. If you have a not satisfying first sexual experience, that does not mean that you will never have a high
I
sex
can
drive,
attest to that.
right? Like,
I can attest to that.
I can attest to that as well.
Like, so just, you know, and we all go through highs and lows.
Communicate, ask for what you need, and
Watch Outlander.
and watch out. Thank you. And also, if you're not getting what you need, guide that person.
Communicate. Yeah,
Well, and
multiple
honestly,
ways.
let's just put this out there. Do it yourself a few times, because the more you have an orgasm.
I've always liked a good DIY.
Okay, so get out the vibrator is what I'm saying. And have an orgasm. Like, it doesn't have to be necessarily with a partner.
It's like Nike,
Well,
just do it.
Just
you know
do
what,
it.
though? If, like,
but it will increase
if
your
you-
sex drive. The
you're
more you
right.
have orgasms, the
Right.
more you want them.
Absolutely.
Incentivize.
And
Yeah.
if you don't know what you like, then figure it out
Yeah.
yourself and then tell your partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and there is nothing wrong with little self-stimulation. And like Mindy just said, there are tons of researchers that have found that the more you masturbate, the higher your sex drive is.
Yeah. Just in case you guys weren't aware, dear listeners, this is a sex positive podcast.
Can you imagine if this is somebody started with this episode?
Yeah, I feel like that every week. I'm like, oh man, if this is the first one,
You know
they're like,
what,
what?
though? If this is the first episode you're listening to, I really hope that you're going, why am I not sex positive? Like, it is okay for you to be that way. Be a good person. Maybe don't, spread STDs. Like, make sure you're being safe. But, like, you do you and you get yours. You deserve it.
Craft cocktails don't have to be fussy or ingredient heavy. Make and Muddle is here so that you can have a delicious 3-ingredient cocktail every time. Spend more time reading and less time mixing. Make and Muddle. Cocktail evangelist here to spread the good news about booze.
Yeah, so that ends chapter 33, and
6.
somebody comes and gets Hawk. She's not sure who it is. I'm assuming it's Kieran, but I don't think we actually know that.
I feel like it was Magda, because didn't she hand
it
him the
was-
clothes?
Well, whoever it was did,
Yeah.
but I mean, I guess it could have been.
Yeah.
Well,
Someone
anyway,
comes and gets him because
somebody-
shit's hitting the fan.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. And so he leaves, and while he's gone, Poppy's awake for a little while and is basically thinking through, like, okay, I'm obviously not virginal. I'm technically not the maiden. I definitely don't want to be the maiden. I'm not gonna be the maiden. And she's having this whole, like, humongous decision, like this really important moment for her and in her life and her identity, and kind of an empowering moment for her of, like, people have been telling me what to do as the maiden my entire life, and I'm gonna decide that that's not what I want. But for me, that's also very it's heartbreaking to me, honestly, because she is so happy and content and feeling like at peace with this decision that she's making. And
She's at peace, but it's because of her orgasms.
well, but she's
I'm
also
kidding, I
like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go to Carcedonia and be the maiden anymore. And, like, I would love to be with Hawk. Maybe he doesn't want to be with me. Like, he's not going to want to go in exile for me. And I'm like, oh, honey.
And she
he
gets
will,
to enjoy
first
it
of all.
for an evening.
Not even.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
she's
Like,
asleep most of the
Yeah.
time. She
it's
would have
just
been enjoying it.
that this whole inner monologue that she is having is JLA setting up, like, the biggest devastation. Like, the emotional impact of what is about to happen is so much bigger, so much deeper because of this internal monologue.
Because I think what you start to figure out as a reader is that if he had told her, hey, I was using you, I no longer am I'm very, very sorry. And she would have said, that really fucking sucks, but I already made this decision without you.
Yeah.
Right? So the fact that she gets the decision taken away again, like she loses control again, because she said, I wouldn't go back to that life with no rights, of hiding my gift and being unable to help people, of allowing others to do whatever they wanted with me and to me because I had no choice, or I was constantly put in a position where I had to accept whatever was done out of fear for someone else, which is exactly the position that he puts her back into.
Right.
So,
And to be fair to him, like you just said, it's all hitting the fan, right? Like he's got his dad that he's going to have to stay or like keep at arm's length.
Well,
He's
because
got
the dad wants to use her as bait too.
Of course, right. And so, Alistair's on his way. He's got all these people he knows like hate her and are going to want to hurt her. And he's got his own inner conflict. Like there is a lot going on for him as well. But it super, super sucks that it's at Poppy's
Expense.
Right.
expense. Yeah, exactly.
So can I point out too that hockey's like hockey.
Sweet little hockey boy.
hockey. Hawk and Poppy, she's already said I can't ascend. And her idea is, because she's using like logic at this point, I'm just going to go to the queen and be honest.
I know.
It says, I will tell her what's going on. She will help me no matter what. I'm the queen's favorite. And then she says, I didn't want to disappoint her. And she talks about that's the only thing she's scared about. She's not disappointed, or she's not worried about disappointing the gods. She's not worried about losing her virginity. She's not worried about like what people think about her. She's worried about disappointing the queen. So I was thinking just a little bit as I was reading this, because if you have read the whole series, essentially like the queen is Poppy's mother, but Coralina and Leo, is that right? Coralina and Leo act as her parents. But when they try to run away, the queen essentially kidnaps Poppy back. And then Poppy is then kidnapped here by Hawk and his crew, or Castell and his crew. So I wanted to talk a little bit about famous people who have actually been kidnapped, which it happens a lot more often than you realize, and like it's kind of terrifying. And then where Stockholm Syndrome comes from, because it actually comes from a famous person. So I do want to go ahead and say, huge trigger warning: kidnapping, obviously, but rape and violence. So I've got quite a few instances here of people that that have been kidnapped outside of like famous like crime cases, right?
Right.
So the first one is actually Jessica Alba, who you might know from the Fantastic Four movies. One of her first movies was Flipper, and she started receiving weird phone calls on set and was kidnapped and was found gagged and restrained in the trunk of a car at 14 years old.
I did not know that.
Idea.
So they never found the criminal. It's a cold case. She can't remember anything, and like she's never publicly talked about it.
Well, sure.
Right. And so like that was the first one. And I mean, this is a girl that's like surrounded by people, just like Poppy was, right? Like they have no idea how she was taken.
Wow, that's
so
scary.
The second one, and this one's much more recent, and you've probably heard of this one, was that Kim Kardashian was actually kidnapped in Paris in 2016. So two men who were dressed as policemen tied her up with zip ties and duct taped her eyes, mouth, and legs. So she was able to free herself, but they stole $10 million worth of jewelry out of her room. And that was a big opening, or a big moment for her, because she was always publicly putting where she was on social media.
Snapchat, Instagram,
Right. And
yeah.
now she doesn't put it until she's already left that area.
Right.
So
Quick
go ahead.
sidebar on that. I highly recommend looking up the episode where she talks about that on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It's very, I mean, it's just heartbreaking. Like, I'm not a huge Kardashian fan, but that episode in particular is very humanizing.
Well, and
So
I know
highly
that people
recommend it.
kind of make fun of them, and they kind of live in their own outer space type of world because of the amount of money that they have, but nobody deserves that.
Right.
Oh, no.
No.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, she literally thought she was going to be raped and killed.
Right,
For sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there is someone called Duffy. This person is a Welsh singer.
I love her.
So did you know she was kidnapped after being drugged at a restaurant and was kept drugged in a foreign country for 4 years?
In a foreign
Or
country.
4 weeks. I'm sorry, four
was like,
weeks.
4 years.
Right. So she actually wrote a short memoir about it in 2002, but that's why she fell off the radar for a long time.
Because she had that one like huge hit.
Yeah, so that's why, because she was kidnapped and
Oh
then
my
was
God.
recovering. So she knows who it is, and that person, I guess, I don't know, like if they're in jail or what, but she's never publicly said who it is.
Yeah.
Which again, like that's nobody's business, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jeremy London is he on Seventh Heaven? Because we've been talking about Seventh Heaven.
It's
a
either
lot.
him or his brother.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he had a really strange kidnapping, actually, that no one believed him until his kidnapper came clean and came forward and said they did do it. Apparently,
awful.
Jeremy was, he had been having some substance abuse problems, and he was actually kidnapped, and then he was never hurt or assaulted, but the two people held him at gunpoint and forced him to do drugs while he was in recovery. So even his family came forward and said, he was never kidnapped. That's bullshit. He's just an addict. And then
Did they think he was lying or
right,
like
they thought he was
hallucinating or
lying
something?
because he had used. And then the kidnapper came forward and was like, no, actually.
That's awful.
Isn't that awful?
That's like an
Oh my
extra
God.
layer of horrible
Yeah.
to make somebody in recovery
So again,
fall
like,
off.
you know,
that's
we
horrible.
blame the victim all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's one I didn't know about, and this has to do with Madonna. So she has denied this, but there are hospital and police reports that show that Sean Penn, her then husband, had abducted, beaten, and tied her to a chair for several hours, and then the police came and freed her.
I actually did hear about
this is
that
the
one
kind of
time.
shit that like happens that like I feel like just gets swept under the rug, where they're like, well, that didn't happen, and I'm like, well, there's reports about it.
Yeah.
Right. And it
Well,
says that she denied it because they had reconciled and she didn't want him to.
Yeah.
Well, and that was before social media too. So like stuff wasn't as easily accessible and
Right.
it wasn't as quick to get out. So it was
Exactly.
easy to like sweep that stuff easier to sweep it under the rug.
Right. So I know this one's going to come as a shocker, but Al Capone publicly kidnapped a well-known jazz singer at the time named Thomas Fats Waller and forced him to play music for him for several days. So he was literally like manhandled by two of Al Capone's like guys, and they stuffed him into a car and took him to his club and made him play. So
Like he was their music bitch or
exactly.
something?
So
It's like
after
in Guild.
yeah, it is actually.
play the harp for
so
me.
after several days, Fats was actually released, and Al Capone paid him several $1,000s for his troubles.
Why didn't you just
funny?
ask? Why didn't you just hire him?
Right,
Like
exactly.
what that is
Right.
really disturbing.
Okay, so
If I stick to this one more
Speaking-
time. Sorry.
Mindy's sticking to the table where she came earlier. I'm talking about
so
kidnapping.
Terrible.
I'm talking about kidnapping, and you're over there talking about sticky spots.
Well, what did you do on this table? This is your table.
I never sit in that spot, you nasty. Okay, so another singer, so a member of the Supremes, a woman named Cindy Songbird, which is like such a perfect name for a singer, right? She was abducted by her building maintenance man and escaped by jumping out of a moving car.
Oh my gosh.
Damn.
I know. So it's crazy how all this happens and you never heard of it. Okay, so last but not least, obviously, everyone's heard about Patty Hearst, right? And
Right.
she was abducted. So she was a newspaper heiress who was kidnapped and went on a crime spree with an extremist group. So as famous as this case is, I didn't realize that this is the case that made Stockholm Syndrome a thing. So it became a recognized condition because even though Patty was clearly brainwashed, she had memory problems, she was going by a different name by the time they caught up with her, and she was malnourished, she maintained that her actions were her own and actually empathized with her kidnappers that took her on
wow.
this crime spree, even though she was not in her right mind when she was found. So let's chat a little bit about the symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome, because I think you're going to see some similarities when it comes to Poppy and the Queen, unfortunately. Okay, so when you have Stockholm Syndrome, you have positive feelings towards your captors or abusers. You have feelings of love or sympathy towards your captors, and victims have negative feelings towards law enforcement or anyone that wants to protect them. So think about how Poppy feels about the dissenters, right? So you're most likely to experience Stockholm Syndrome if you've been in an emotionally charged state for an extended period of time, you've shared a space with your hostage your hostage taker in less than ideal conditions, kind of like being in the trenches together, if you are dependent on your taker for basic needs, if threats to your life are not followed through on, or if you as a hostage are not dehumanized. So The impacts of Stockholm Syndrome can include embarrassment about the emotions towards your abuser, like the positive emotions, guilt, difficulty trusting others, and PTSD, which we see tons of symptoms for PTSD in Poppy in terms of like nightmares and cold sweats and like these near panic attacks that she has. So I don't feel like Poppy has Stockholm Syndrome with Hawk, right? Because later in books, she is very much like, what the fuck, dude? Like she does have feelings for him, but she doesn't empathize with what he did.
I'm glad you said that because I thought that's where you were going to go.
I know. You were like infographic number 27. Okay. So, but again, I want to point out she does have these symptoms towards Queen Ileana. So I'm going to go back. If you're most likely to experience Stockholm Syndrome, here's what you'll do. You've been in an emotionally charged state for an extended period of time. So Queen Ileana took Poppy back after her parents died, and Poppy talks consistently about how the queen took care of her, how she brushed her hair and wiped her tears away.
Held her while she cried.
She also is dependent on the queen for her basic needs. So the queen convinces her that without her care, she will not be safe. So yes, her basic needs are met, like food and everything, but it's the safety thing. Then that's why she has to be veiled, and that's why she has to be guarded at all times.
Protection.
And the threats on her life were not followed through on. So Duke Tierman, right? Like they get her just to the brink of being hurt and all of these things, but no one actually, follows through with what the queen tells her she should be worried about. And then the last one, the one where I said the hostage isn't dehumanized. So Poppy's actually put on a pedestal and is like the supreme human, right? And so I feel like the queen, and we know that the queen is very, very smart, right? And very, very manipulative. And so she has used Poppy's emotions against her and really used this Stockholm Syndrome to create this love for Poppy that she would have never had for Queen Ileana without her being kidnapped back from her parents. So I really loved this because I've never really thought about, I honestly started this deep dive and like, well, Poppy has Stockholm Syndrome for Hawk, like 100%. She doesn't.
I knew you thought that.
Well, here's the thing, because someone on Instagram the other day posted for the infographic about, is Hawk a psychopath or a sociopath? And she's like, Hawk is neither. And I wrote back, I said, I know, I just really like rallying up Whitney. and I like the conversations that we have around these things, right? And so I did start this deep dive with the intent of pissing you off. Not really, not making you mad, but hearing what you had to say about it, right? Because I really respect your opinion and like how you think about things.
Thank you.
So when I say I'm trying to piss you off, I'm really kidding. But she does not have any symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome with him at all. They're all towards the queen.
Well, and she even says, they're just thinking about like empathizing with your captor or whatever. She says like the queen would never treat me poorly. Like
exactly.
I can go to her. I could never have talked about this with the Tiermans.
Right.
But I can talk to the queen about it.
And she keeps me safe, and she's going to give me everything that I need, and she's going to listen to me.
Right. Well, and little does she know that at this point, the queen's plan is to murder Poppy to raise coldness, right? And like she just, Poppy obviously doesn't know that, but that, interesting.
Queen Ileana, you a bitch.
Yeah, she is. She is kind of the worst.
She is a brilliant, manipulative, cunning,
she's super smart,
horrible person, and she's one of those characters where you're like, think of all the amazing things you could do in the world with how smart you are,
and how much power you have.
But if you also, because when I was writing this out, I was thinking like, why is she like this? And you think about the fact that like her other child was killed. And we don't really know what happened there. To me, I feel like we're going to find out something like horrible about the way that this little boy was killed.
I wonder if he's actually
not dead.
Yeah,
right.
Like if he's going to come back
somehow. Or maybe she thinks he was killed, because grief can make you do horrible, horrible things. And so, like, she's taking all of her grief out on her other two kids, right?
Yeah,
because she's lost her husband, she's lost a son. And I think she is grasping at straws of like trying to maintain control of her life. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And she has no one she can turn to because no one knows that she's a Demi's. No one knows that she's Poppy's. Well, some people know she's Poppy's mom, but like she is truly in her grief alone.
Well, and I wonder too, like losing your heartmate, it makes me think about the bonds that tie. Like when you lose your bonded, like it kind of makes you go insane.
Well, they talk in later books about going insane if you lose your heartmate, because that's the first heartmate trials. It talks about how that person slowly went insane without his heartmate.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same thing. It's like that in ACOTAR, too.
Yes, yeah.
It's like that a little bit in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because, like, you're supposed to think that Spike and Buffy are supposed to be together, and he does some, like, insane things. Like, there's a whole lore behind that, too. And so, yeah, I think that she is a little bit nutso in grief.
Just a little.
Yeah, a little bit. She just, is killing children. No
right.
biggie.
Yeah. No big deal.
All right. Sorry, that was a long deep dive, but I felt like it needed to be said.
It's
and I needed to come to
interesting.
the conclusion that Poppy didn't have Stockholm Syndrome for Hawk.
right. And she's got a lot of other things for Hawk. Not Stockholm Syndrome. So yeah, she's made this decision. She's waiting for Hawk to come back, and then Phillips shows up. And this is where I feel like I was just being real goofy when I started making these notes at this point. Just FYI, I just wrote like, poor Phillips. He's just too smart, because he's like, we gotta go. Like, this is, we can't find these other two guys. We don't know Hawk. We don't know Kieran. Like, there's something weird about this town. Like, he is figuring it out, right? And we find out in a little bit that the other guards are figuring it out too. And this is the issue that Hawk has gone to deal with, right? And so it breaks my heart. It really does, because she is like, oh, Phillips must be a dissenter.
Yeah.
That's the only explanation for the way that he's acting and the things that he's saying.
Because
like,
why would Hawk do all these sweet things
Yeah.
to me and say all these sweet things?
It's like not even in the realm of possibility
And
at all.
she says like maybe Kieran, but not Hawk.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, she's
yeah.
like, well, Hawk trusts Kieran, so I trust Kieran, which I'm like, yes, good job. That's actually what you should be doing.
Yeah.
But it's just, she refuses to even entertain the possibility.
So,
and it
as
hurts
she's
me.
thinking of Phillips being a dissenter, he says two things that Hawk would also say, right? Because Hawk is actually the dissenter, right?
Yeah.
So Phillips says, I don't want to harm you, but I will incapacitate you if that means getting you out of this place to somewhere safe, which is 100% what Hawk would do for her, right? Not against her.
Well, and he says too, later in book 2, he says to Poppy, I'm not going to let you do something stupid to hurt yourself,
Right.
right? Like, I will stop you from that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. And then Phillips also says, or I'm sorry, Poppy thinks to herself, Phillips may want to keep me alive, but I was just as effective as a message if I was dead, which is exactly how Hawk was feeling about it before he
Right.
met her. So she is thinking all of these true things about the wrong person.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her line of thinking is spot on, but just applied to the incorrect
Yeah, she's got
direction.
that sexual haze. It's clouding her judgment a little bit.
Yeah.
So when I first read this, so I know we know now, but when I first read this, I'm like, what is up with Phillips? Is he a paranoid schizophrenic? Like, I really thought something's up. I know, right? No, but I'm like, he's acting really weird. So pretend for a minute that you're Poppy or whatever, and this person comes in.
Can I be Poppy from a couple of hours ago?
Yeah. But if you're reading this for the first time, I mean, I really went there. I was like, okay, he's paranoid about something, right?
Yeah.
Even though we know now it was all true. But I wanted to see if there are a lot of symptoms of paranoia. I did not realize how many. And I kind of went through her interactions to see, which ones applied and which ones didn't. And I think I've come to the conclusion that he was paranoid, but he was paranoid about the right things.
Is it paranoia if you're actually correct?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good,
Yes.
is the definition of paranoia only if you're incorrect?
Right. It's really, yeah, that's
Because it's almost like the
Interesting
chicken or
question.
the egg type of thing,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
I've, not to get off on a tangent, but I've talked to my sleep doctor about anxiety, right? And he helped me understand that anxiety, don't forget, you need a little bit of it to fuel you forward, right?
Yeah.
You need, if you hate your job, you need anxiety to go to work so you can pay your bills, right? You need anxiety to make sure that you're not leaving your kids somewhere unsafe, and so it's the same thing with paranoia. You need paranoia to be a part of the world, because you need
to have a little bit of
suspect-
fear.
right? You do need to suspect things around you, but
Yeah.
is the definition of paranoia only when it's not true?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, because I did see a little bit about the difference between anxiety and paranoia definitely goes one step further in there's some delusions and conspiracy theory kind of things that apply to paranoia that don't really necessarily apply to anxiety. But there's like 15 of these, and I'll go through them really quickly. So the first one was be easily offended, and I really couldn't find any evidence of that. And he didn't seem offended, really.
We don't know why Hawk left the room either, because it
Right.
was Philip's like, why the fuck are you guys acting weird?
Right. I mean, so I don't know. Like, that kind of depends on how you view being offended. But the second one is finding it difficult to trust others. Phillips doesn't trust anybody. He didn't even trust Poppy at this point. He's like,
None of her guards should trust anybody. That's
Right.
the thing. Like, if you're in
but
that
they should
type of
trust
position-
her.
You don't think he trusts her in this moment?
No, he tells her, I don't mean to say that I don't think you believe me, but I know you have weapons on you and I want you to walk in front of me.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
You know?
like, you could fuck me up because
Yeah.
you don't believe me. That's a good point.
And then the next one is doesn't cope with any type of criticism. And there wasn't an instance of that where he was being criticized. So I kind of put like nixed on that. Assign harmful meanings to other people's remarks. And the only thing I could find with that was maybe when Kieran asks what they're doing in the hallway, he automatically readies his sword.
Yep.
Like he's like, oh, he's asking me what I'm doing in the hallway, then he's attacking me.
Right.
You know, so that kind of
He
goes
wasn't
with,
wrong.
I mean,
Right.
you know,
Right.
be always on the defensive. He's constantly trying to justify why he needs to take her away. So
But he's also on the defensive about, like, how the fuck did Hawk raise ranks? And why did Kieran all
Right.
of a sudden
Who is
show
this
up?
Right.
Kieran
Who the
dude?
fuck
Yeah.
is
how did
Commander
this all
Jansen?
happen?
Yeah.
And there's another one that comes out where he calls out Commander Jansen. Be hostile, aggressive, and argumentative. He argues with Poppy about
yes.
Hawk being too new and young to be her guard, and he does show some aggression towards Poppy when he threatens to incapacitate her. Not be able to compromise. He refuses to hear Poppy's explanations for things, even though they're wrong. Right.
Right,
Like
yeah.
they're, you know. Like when he says, have you noticed there's no ascended here? And she's like, well, they told me it's, oh,
Yeah.
they told me he went hunting, you know, like,
Yeah.
and he's like, he just wholly disregards that. He doesn't.
Ascended don't hunt, Poppy.
Right.
Oh, not in the way you think. Wah,
Yeah.
wah.
Find it difficult, if not impossible, to forgive and forget. And that's where I kind of put in where he calls out Commander Jansen, like, what the fuck was he thinking? Like,
Yeah. How did this happen?
yeah. Assume that people are talking ill of them behind their back. I didn't really find a whole lot for that necessarily.
I do feel like when Kieran shows up, though, he feels like something was going on behind the scenes.
That's true. That is
Yeah.
true. Well, he does. He talks about like this is weird. Something's going on that we don't know about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that could apply. Be overly suspicious. Duh. Like think that other people are lying or scheming or to cheat them. You know, obviously he wants to believe that Poppy believes him, but he's suspicious of her and thinks she will use her weapon on him. Not be able to confide in anyone. So he does confide in Poppy and the other guards. So he is talking about this, but he doesn't trust Poppy. So I don't know. That's kind of a weird juxtaposition. Find relationships difficult. I don't know about that. I mean, obviously he's a horse lover, so I don't know about that. So I just put not really for that.
All I can think of is, I'm a mother lover, you're a mother lover. Let's go fuck each other's horses.
Or you could be, he's an equine lover.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Back on track. Considers the world to be a place of constant threat. So he feels like they walked into a trap. He feels like something isn't right
But
about
again,
New
as a
Haven.
They
guard,
did,
you
yeah.
should feel
I know.
like the world is in constant
True,
threat.
true.
Like, these
Right.
guys have to have a level of paranoia to do their job right.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder why Poppy doesn't automatically trust that.
Because she trusts Hawk.
I know,
Yeah,
I guess so.
because she
Yeah,
only
she's
sees Hawk.
blinded by the light.
By the dick.
by the dick.
I told you it was going to be your doing earlier.
Feel persecuted by the world at large. Not yet. I put, he doesn't really get a chance to feel that because he
No,
dies.
Bless it.
I know. And then believe in unfounded conspiracy theories. I put, I mean, he believes the Ascended are the good guys.
Right.
But
So-
also, he has to believe in Wolven really, really quick.
Oh, that's true.
Well, and-
Yeah.
He technically believes in an unfounded conspiracy theory that Hawk and Kieran are plotting against them. Right? Like he
right.
is correct.
Right.
But
But
in
at
this
this-
moment, he
you
has
don't know
no
that.
proof.
Yeah.
He has no proof other than his
Then
gut.
he feels
Yeah, right.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's, I mean, I think,
Well, sorry, let me rephrase. He actually has the proof of the two missing guards that
Yeah, but-
he hasn't seen.
yeah,
Right,
but
wouldn't you say that finding something out starts with paranoia?
Well,
right?
yeah.
that is
Yeah.
true.
Suspicion. The
Yeah.
suspicion.
So- being suspicious
I guess I
behavior.
would want to know more about like what gets you to the point of unhealthy, right? Is it when it starts affecting your day-to-day life, when it
Yeah.
starts affecting your, I guess you pointed this out, your day-to-day relationships.
Right. Like, I mean, a lot of this, like when you can tell that they're
Like,
not
he shouldn't
not
think-
functioning as like
Right.
a actual, like having a functioning day.
He's not rationally thinking.
He's not grounded
he
in reality.
Right. He assumes Poppy is going to attack him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he's really not wrong. Again,
Yeah.
Whitney, like, it's a right assumption, but
Right.
he doesn't have a reason to really think that.
He has no real proof.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
There's
is
nothing
correct.
conclusive.
But I
Yeah.
think gut intuition has taken me a long way in life.
Yeah, no,
True.
I think
And,
that-
I mean, you
that's
can,
a real thing.
There is
Yeah.
something about it feels weird in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to deep
But I mean,
dive into
even
the
she
psychology
kinda-
of that.
Yeah.
She even says it felt weird when they
Right.
get in
Like,
there.
where's
So,
the Lord? Where's
Yeah.
the royal? Yeah.
so she's
100%.
questioning it too, but she's not going around, I guess,
She
and like
trusts
trying to
Hawk.
tell everybody. Yeah.
She trusts him too
Yeah.
much.
Right. But she's
Yeah.
also questioning everything.
That is
now.
true. She's
Everything
questioning
else,
her
yeah.
entire life at this point.
That's true.
But I thought that was like a
Poor Phillips.
poor Phillips. I know.
I know,
So-
and those other two guys, I wrote these down. The two dudes that he's like, we haven't seen these two guys since we got here. I wrote, poor Evans and Warren, we hardly knew ye. Because that's the only time we heard their names.
That is true.
Okay, can we talk a little bit about the underworld shit that, like, I'm talking about the movie with Kate Beckinsale.
Yes.
When Kieran changes into a woman the first time, did you picture underworld
I pictured Twilight
or Twilight?
Jacob
Yeah.
Black.
Oh,
yeah.
So Jacob Black really changes in a very like clean type of way,
Yes.
right? He turns into this like fluffy,
Like
furry
all at
little thing.
once
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Whereas the werewolves and the shapeshifters in the underworld change a lot more like Kieran do, where like their bones crack and they're reformed and they
like a
have
little
this
bit at a
snout.
time, yeah.
And like it's painful.
It reminds me of
Right.
Vampire Diaries.
Oh yeah, with Tyler.
Yeah.
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 Ugh, I love Vampire Diaries.
I never watched it.
So
What the
good.
fuck is wrong with you?
I'm just over here rereading all these same book series that I've read a million times.
I wouldn't say it's a why choose, but there is some brother love
Yeah.
triangle.
Yeah. No, love
Love
She
triangle.
has to pick between the brothers.
I said it's
okay.
not a why choose, but there is a brother.
Well, no,
triangle.
the way you said that made it sound like the brothers were like together with each other.
Oh no, but
That's why I was making that
no,
face.
but they're both really hot.
Because I'm like,
They
if this
are.
is some Game of Thrones sibling stuff, I can't.
No, thank
with
you.
that. Yeah, no thanks. But no, yeah, Kieran, she agrees to go with Phillips, but basically is like, I'll go with Phillips and then find Hawk, right?
Yeah.
And Kieran's in the hallway, and Kieran is like, no, thank you, and shifts into a wolfen. And up to this point, they have been taught, Poppy and Phillips would have been taught that wolven were extinct and had been extinct for like centuries. And so she immediately recognizes that is a wolven.
Yeah.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
shit.
and
right?
automatically
Yeah.
thinks he's done something to Hawk.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, again,
Which again,
Oh,
like,
Poppy.
but if you're taking the facts that she has, that he
Sure.
was pulled out in the middle of
That's
the night,
logical.
she has not seen him for hours, and Kieran has lied to her.
Yeah.
Of course, she's
Yep.
going to be like, "Well, fuck."
well, and in
Yeah.
her mind too, wolven are obviously related to Atlantia, who she still thinks are like the worst people on the planet. So if there's somebody connected to Atlantia here, they must be a horrible person, right?
Well, and that just feeds her fears of anybody being a dissenter around her, even though I know she thinks it's Phillips right here. But I mean, she does think about that constantly about people being dissenters. So she would go there as well.
Yeah, and this is another example of, I'm just thinking about JLA's writing, of building that tension, right? Like the same way with the attack on the Great Right. It's like Philip comes in and is automatically super weird, and Poppy's automatically on high alert, right? And then they go out in the hall, and Kieran being in the hall adds a layer to the tension. Kieran turning into the wolven adds a layer of tension. Them running outside to try to get away from Kieran adds a layer of tension.
Okay.
Like it's
Who
all,
really believes that they were able to outrun
no,
a
they're not.
wolven?
They weren't at all.
yeah, I think
No.
he wasn't going to kill her.
Well,
right?
and he says either Kieran or Hawk later says to Poppy, like, he didn't catch you because he didn't want to catch you.
Okay.
Right? Like,
he wanted to scare Phillips. That's it.
Okay.
right.
And I mean, he would have killed Phillips to
Didn't
keep Poppy.
he wolf out though because he got wolfed out?
That's a Twilight thing. Well, yeah, because Phillips cuts him.
Yeah, Phillips, and so then
he loses control.
I think
so maybe
he's definitely
he's
lost
like,
control.
oh shit, I did this. I need to
he
scare
said
him.
you should not have done that.
Yeah. So he scares them, but not like.
So I want to talk about when they go into the barn. Right, they're running from Kieran, and Jericho's balls come out. Okay,
Balls of Jericho.
So it says it was him, the man who had killed Rylan, and I wrote "fuck you." So he said, "Told you I'd be seeing you again," and she looks at him and goes, "You seem to be missing a hand."
I know.
I wish I'd done that.
I know.
And I'm like, oh, I wrote queen all the way, right?
I wrote that down too. That she immediately taunts him.
Yeah.
Right. And
Instead of being scared about
right,
it,
and
she's
he
like, "Oh, you
said-
motherfucker!"
Well, because I think she still thinks like I've got Phillips here, Hawk's probably around, I've got these two guards, and I've already fucked this guy up once,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'll
and
be
so
fine.
he says, "Do you remember my promise?" And she goes, "Bathe in my blood, feast on my
yeah.
entrails. I haven't
blah, blah.
forgotten."
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my god, you are so awesome because like
Yeah.
she knows he wants to kill her,
Right.
And she's just like, you can't fuck
Nice
with
try.
Well, and he's
Stupid.
very obviously like trying to freak her out, right?
Yeah.
And be super intimidating and make her feel terrified.
And she's like emasculating him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And all the while, she's like, "Have you guys seen Hawk? Has anybody
Yeah.
seen Hawk? Has everybody, does
Yeah,
anybody
where's
know if
Hawk?
Hawk's okay?" And it's just like, oh my gosh,
oh, honey.
the devastation is
I
about to
know.
come, and freaking Jericho is such a dick about it. And then I didn't realize, when Hawk, he shows up and he's like, "It's okay." It's like, no, sir, it's
I
not.
wrote,
It's
"No,
not.
it isn't."
Yeah, it's not okay. But he shoots Phillips in the mouth.
Yes.
I
Didn't she
underlined
do that to a
too.
Craven?
She did.
Yeah, that's
well,
what-
and it goes back to the whole like eye thing I talked about a couple of episodes
Yeah.
ago. Now I kind of want to look into like why do people keep getting shot
Shot in
through
the
the
mouth.
right? And I mean, it is like your way of communicating the world and the way that you get your sustenance.
Maybe it's a
and-
way of silencing.
I was just
Yeah.
about to say
Yeah.
he was running his mouth to Poppy,
Yeah.
right? And I bet he messed up the timing of a plan,
Yeah.
right?
right, 100%. Because
but-
Jericho didn't have to come out of hiding at that point. He was
He was in the barn,
Right, I know,
Yeah.
but he didn't have to come out of hiding. He came to
Oh, I
taunt
see what you mean.
Phillips,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
then Phillips is running his mouth because he's going to keep her safe no matter what, which is essentially what Hawk's also trying to do at this point.
Right.
It just doesn't
Right.
look
But-
like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She doesn't have the full story. And we as a reader don't have the full
Yeah.
story either, right? But yeah, so Hawk kills Phillips, and then that moment where Poppy is just like, "I don't understand what's happening." And it's like so obvious and so clear, but her trust in him is just so
Unwavering.
Yes, and
Yeah.
it's just
He
like,
blocks
oh.
her.
Oh, I
feeling
know.
it.
Yeah, I know.
To
That
me,
one-
I remember
that.
thinking like, so like, is he innocent and she didn't know? Like that was such a cool thing to do at that moment as the author because I was like, why can't she feel anything? That's fucking crazy. Only the people that we think are soulless, like she
Right.
can't feel
Yeah.
anything from.
Right.
Yeah.
Which again, like he didn't have to do that. And I think for him that was a self protection.
Also, he's conflicted and is in love with
Exactly.
her.
He
And-
doesn't
yeah.
want her to know that. He doesn't want her to say that out loud for his people to hear that. And I get that.
I guess,
but
but
it
like,
still sucks.
I feel like he would almost want, I feel like he would want her to know that. So like she can still trust him. But instead he puts up this wall and that just makes it more
Well, we find out
Difficult.
later.
Big is up though.
We find out later that he believes she is going to hate him and hate him forever.
Well,
and
that's true.
he, I think, is closing his emotions off to her to protect himself
That makes sense.
because he thinks like, well, this is over now. Like she's going to hate me,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't want to deal with it. You know.
Can you believe though that Jericho actually had the audacity to say that he knew what pieces he wanted to cut off of her and send back?
Yes. It's like
I'm like, you already lost your fucking arm, dude. Do you really think that's the best thing to say?
Very,
Yeah, no
very
kidding.
stupid. Well, because it's not that much later when they're. Well, I guess it is a little bit later. Jericho's already dead at that point. I was just thinking at that dinner at the end of the book when what's his face is
Landell.
Yes, I was trying to remember his name. And Kieran is like, if somebody is dumb enough to like talk badly about you in front of him, like they're stupid and they're not somebody I would spend time with.
Right.
And like Jericho is that person.
Yeah.
Right.
But also, Jericho dug his own grave,
Oh, for
right?
sure.
Like
100%, yes.
For those of you that can't remember, he leads essentially a whole team to go down and kill her, and that also says a lot about him because if he felt so confident, he could have gone down and alone. But he knew she would fuck him up.
Yeah.
if he went
Well,
down
and
there
he
by
was
himself.
just getting off. I think he was just getting off on the power of
100%, yeah.
leading other people, right?
Like,
Like,
we're
well, I'm
gonna
not the
kill the
only one.
maiden.
I'm not the only one that feels this way.
Well,
Therefore,
because
I'm
then
right.
Right.
You can go to Castile as the prince and be like, "Well, we all felt that way, right?"
Well, and he was thinking his plan was to kill Delano.
Don't kill Delano.
That's what he was
I
going to
know,
do.
I
Was it
know.
Niall down there with him? Somebody
Yeah.
was down there with Delano, and Jericho says, I mean, we'll get there, but Jericho says, like, well, we'll just kill you for the prince to not find out that it was us, right? So he just is too arrogant for his own good.
Yeah.
But yeah, in front of him in that moment to be like, I'm so glad I'm here to see this, to watch Poppy
Yeah.
realize that Hawk has been tricking her this whole time. And it's just, it's unnecessary,
Well,
Jericho.
and it talks
dickhead.
about the coldness in Hawk's tone, but I think that's meant towards Jericho. And
Oh,
Oh,
100%.
yeah.
right, but she sees it as meant towards
But
her.
can we talk about how this is the first time he basically says touch her and die?
Oh, I love that.
Right?
trope.
That's
my
thank you for
favorite.
bringing it back to a positive
Touch
place.
her and die trope. If he touched me, I would die.
But yeah, the chapter ends with him saying we need her alive, and I hate that because I mean, first of all, it's the confirmation to Poppy that she's been tricked and used, right? But also this like the we need her, like not even like I want her alive.
It sounds
Or-
so
detached.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like he's had to detach himself at this point
Yeah.
because
Because
he's
Agreed.
getting pressure to move forward with this plan that he does not want to be a part
Well,
of.
and he thinks, just like she thinks that Hawk doesn't feel about her the way she feels for him, he thinks that she's going to hate him forever.
Yeah.
And he does not feel that way about her, right?
If people would just communicate,
Exactly. That's all you have to do.
we
folks.
wouldn't have these books.
I do have a couple of teasers from A Soul of Ash and Blood, which is the Hawk POV coming out in July 2023. I wanted to be a good man who would walk away from what he knew he was unworthy and undeserving of. The kind Kieran believed I was. The one I was raised to be. But I wasn't a good man. I was just hers. So I think that's when she says, like, please stay with me. And he's like, I really, really shouldn't. But here I go. I don't know if this is in this part of the book or not. It could be earlier, but I just imagine him leaving in the middle of the night while she's asleep. He could potentially be thinking this. Those minutes in the chamber where I wasn't Hawk Flynn, when everything about me wasn't a lie and I hadn't become a phantom of darkness and madness made real, where I was only living in the moment, not the past or the future, and good gods, I hadn't existed in the now in fucking decades. I'd be out of my mind to want to leave that. I'd be out of my mind not to recognize the dangers in that. So I imagine him saying that to himself
Yeah.
after he leaves her sleeping. But
He knows he's fucked up in a lot of ways.
Yep.
did you guys have anything else about these two chapters?
No.
No, we covered a lot.
Yes,
know.
we did.
Again, I was like, I don't really have that much to say. Yes, I did.
And then we were like, sexual liberation.
Who wants to start with their nerdiest thing of the week?
I think you should go.
Okay. I have two. First of all, I watched the 4-part miniseries on Amazon Prime, Happy Shiny People, about the Duggars and their religious cult that they are a part of. And it was intriguing, interesting, enlightening, horrifying,
Terrifying.
One of
Disturbing.
their daughters is actually like voluntarily participating.
Whitney
I
just slapped her mic out of her own
I
hand.
flipped the microphone around. One of their daughters is participating in the documentary, and it's very interesting.
So
Okay.
one of the kidnapping ones I skipped over was a Duggar girl.
Really?
Ooh.
Well, because for those of you that don't know me in real life, I lived in Arkansas when
Yeah.
he was a state representative, so it was just a little too close to home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get that. So that was one. And then the other like super nerdy thing was JLA released the first 3 chapters of A Soul of Ash and Blood. I didn't send it to you guys because
I have it. I haven't read it yet.
I knew that you wouldn't be interested.
I haven't
couldn't
decided
remember.
yet.
Yeah, so I just didn't say anything.
Here's the thing: I will get pissed off if I have to stop.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm kind of
so
the same way.
Much like I am in my sex life.
I read the first 3 chapters and I'm going to read them again. But several teasers that I think I shared on here, but several of the teasers that she has released were in the first 3 chapters already. And
Oh, wow.
it's like, oh, okay.
Okay, we only have 5 episodes of this season left. I don't want to talk about anything from those 3 chapters.
No,
Please.
I'm just saying. I'm really tired, okay?
She's so excited about
I
these
had to
3 chapters. She keeps slapping her.
I had to teach a 6 a.m. workout today, and it's 11:23, so I'm just tired. But anyway, so I read the first 3 chapters, and they're really good. I'm very excited. Yay! I'm excited to read the rest. Thanks, Jen. Who is next?
I'll go next. So I jumped on the Fourth Wing bandwagon this week.
I haven't yet.
Oh my gosh. I never I'm not one of those that falls into the trap of like the hype of things.
Yeah.
Typically when it's hyped as much as this one is, I definitely I won't say that I don't like what they are, but it usually feels underwhelming.
It falls flat a little bit, yeah.
This book delivers. I'm telling you, Whitney, you have to read it. It's so good. There's several twists, but one major one actually surprised me, which never happens. I mean, never. I always guess the shit. And it kind of irritates me. I'm like, why can't I just be surprised?
I'm so good at all of this.
No, but like I do that. Like I think through everything, and I'll change as I read. I'll change my mind, but usually what happens does cross my mind. As either it may not be where I landed, but I don't know. I just don't always get surprised, and I was super surprised with this, and it just. I don't know. It was just really good. And then the really nerdy thing about it is I was sitting there reading it and my husband said, that book cover is really pretty. And I'm like, I know, right? And look, this is where she signed it. I was like showing him everything. And here's the sticker I got. Like I was super, super nerdy about it.
Funny.
We did all meet Rebecca Yarros at Imaginarium, and poor thing. So like the room's not even open yet where all the authors are, and Imaginarium was so awesome for us. They gave us like a table so we could sell merch, mostly so Deborah could afford to be there. But I will say all these people, including us, got in her line before the door opened so we could get our book signed before.
I mean, she like walked in the room.
She walked
and we were all like, hi.
And so she was very overwhelmed, obviously, because she was not expecting that. And so we all helped her set up her table. And we were like, we're so sorry. Please sign our book.
Let me set those buttons out for you while you sign my book.
She literally had a line wrapped out around registration.
All
the
day.
entire day.
Yeah.
And she took
All
it like a
day.
champ. But she looked at me and she goes,
She was awesome.
She goes, I've been writing for 10 years. How come no one noticed before now?
Like nobody cared until
and
today.
This book, I mean, it is, Mindy's right. It's worth the hype that it's getting. I did like the audiobook arc and it was super duper awesome. The audiobook's great if you do like to listen. And Zayden, man. Whew.
It's next on my list. I got to finish my...
If you're on Book Talk, there's a whole bunch of reels about him becoming the next Shadow Daddy, which I think is hilarious.
I've got to finish my... brother's best friend's smutty book.
Yeah, Whitney was sending us screenshot excerpts. Damn.
It's like page 2.
Yeah. My nerdiest thing has to really do with all of us. So we've got some really cool announcements coming up for some festivals that we'll be doing, but we have on the horizon some really amazing authors that we're going to be interviewing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say who yet, because people get sick and things happen and people drop out. And so I don't want to announce until we've actually
And we don't
recorded.
want to jinx it.
And we don't want to jinx it. But we are super thrilled with everything that's been happening within the Bookstagram community and how supportive everyone is. And I just wish, in the artist community, I wish that the artist community was as supportive as the Bookstagram community, because there's nothing like it. And Bookstagrammers generally, sorry, I keep dropping my pen. Bookstagrammers generally aren't competitive with each other because we don't need to be. We all have the same goal, but it's kind of the same way with art.
Yeah.
in general, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing the same things as each other. We need
Right.
to support each other. But I tend to find myself more on our Bookstagram Instagram account because of that. I love the support that's there,
Yeah.
and everyone's really, really amazing. So I think that's my
We've met some really, really cool people through
Yeah,
this
it's
whole
been
venture.
awesome.
We have.
It's been great.
Yeah, we could do shout outs, but we'd be here for 4 more hours.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're on our Instagram at all and you follow our stories, you know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're all awesome.
Yep.
Thank you for being a friend.
Travel down the road and back again.
I almost sang it, and then I was like,
I'm like,
no.
well, are you just trying to get me to sing every episode now? Because I sang Mariah Carey last episode.
Exactly. That's my goal.
I'm sorry.
Well, that's all for today, dear listeners. Next week, we are going to be talking about chapters 35 and 36.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.